Okay, well, everybody, back live on YouTube, taking a little bit of a risk here. And for that reason, especially because of this particular topic, we are going to only do part of the stream on YouTube and we're going to finish the rest on ROKFIN if ROKFIN decides that it's going to participate in the stream, which I'm not so sure about anymore because I'm looking at it. So if you're watching this on ROKFIN, that's a good sign. But if you're not and you're watching this later after we recorded it, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on there. We'll just have to continue recording and put it up somewhere else. The safe stuff's going to be at the beginning of this. YouTube's got a lot of rules about COVID and election stuff. And so these kind of intermingle in the Michigan kidnapping plot case. I have an independent journalist who's joining me who has been following this probably closer than any other journalist, or at least the top 10 journalists, I think, out there, and has a lot to talk about. Not just this particular case, but its connections to January 6th and what happened there and the FBI and all that stuff. As many of you are probably aware, there were 4 men. Nobody was found guilty. There were 2 basically declared a mistrial, and then the other 2 were acquitted and found not guilty in this plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen, gosh, I always forget her name. Somebody help me. I'm going to bring in Christina real fast. Whitmer. Thank you. I was going to call her Wilson Whitmer. So we're gonna kidnap her allegedly and have been in jail for quite a while. Kind of also similar to the January 6th defendants. But the allegations from the defense attorneys were that the FBI malfeasance essentially led to this plot, in quotes, and that these guys would not have been participating in it if it hadn't been for planning and agitation from the FBI. So it brings up all these questions about federal law enforcement agencies. Again, questions surrounding the connections between this and the January 6th riot. So we have a lot to talk about today. Like I said, I'm throwing the die here on YouTube, and hopefully we're not going to run into any terrible issues with censorship, but this again is one of those topics that YouTube gets a little bit dicey on. They're letting mainstream media talk about it, so I feel a little bit safer, but again, I'm not mainstream media anymore, and so I don't fly under the radar in the same way. I got to be a little bit more careful. When I complain to them, they just don't care as much. I do want to say first that I got to thank my sponsors, and you guys know I got to do this because I got a new one, and I got brand new glasses actually too that I wear when I edit and when I check out your story tips, and those come from betterspectacles.com/Allison. So thank you to my sponsor for helping us put this video together. And if you're a wearer of glasses, either blue light blocking glasses like I am, or progressive lenses like my husband, you should definitely go check them out. These are really high quality glasses. A lot of the glasses out there that are either progressive lens glasses or blue light blocking glasses are total crap. Many of you who wear them know that. And they're a very high quality company. I wear them myself. I'm in front of the computer doing lots of work. My husband has traumatic brain injury from combat and has migraines. His progressive lenses have worked really well and helped him out a lot. And they are giving my viewers over 60% off on progressive lenses, especially if you have a difficult prescription. You can make an appointment, a teleoptical appointment with them. They use biometrics to customize the lenses for you. So if you are a progressive lens wearer and you've just not been very happy with your glasses, you're always squinting, you're having to move your neck all over the place, you get headaches, that kind of thing, then go check out betterspectacles.com/Allison and get your 60% off and support my channel and see better. I don't know if you'll see better that the FBI is trying to entrap you, but at least you'll see better what's going on around you. So that's my first ad read. I usually try to do those when I tape them when I don't have a live guest. But Christina, thank you for sitting through that. Let's get to the topic of today. I think maybe we should just first tell people what just happened, and then I know you were very surprised by the verdict. So could you tell us not just what happened, but why you were surprised?
Yeah. So what just happened, and you gave a pretty good explanation of it, is that the 4 guys who were facing federal conspiracy charges, not only that, but weapons of mass destruction charges, we're talking potentially life in prison. The government secured 0 convictions. So that's huge because the government basically has a 98% conviction rate. People have said, and I'm sure you've heard the phrase, like they can indict a ham sandwich, right? And that's true. Typically, they're given the advantage, U.S. attorneys and their prosecutors, they're typically given the advantage in these cases. And I think that juries tend to view them as authoritative, right? So they tend to kind of favor the government and the government's theory of the case. And so it was very interesting to see the defense mount an entrapment defense that appears to have worked. It's very hard to meet the legal threshold for an entrapment defense. They almost never succeed at trial. So it was very interesting to see that. And initially, the judge had said that they couldn't bring up entrapment until the end. But it was very clear from the beginning of the trial, which began on March 8th, that that was going to be an issue throughout the entire thing. So the judge allowed the defense to bring in entrapment and then gave the jury instructions on entrapment as well, which the government tried to fight. But right now, as it stands, both defendants, Brandon Caserta and Daniel Harris, have been totally acquitted of all of the charges against them. They are now free men. It was Brandon's birthday yesterday, so this came on his birthday. Very fortuitous, I guess. He said it was the best birthday present he could have got. And then the jury was deadlocked on the other two defendants who the government alleged were the main ringleaders of the plot, Adam Fox and Barry Croft. So they could not come to an agreement on the charges against them. And the judge declared a mistrial for that.
All right. Since you were talking about Brandon, this is his attorney, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's Mike Hill, his attorney.
Okay. And we think this is a safe soundbite that we can play, right? Mm-hmm. So here we go. Let me know if you can't hear it.
Volumes and hundreds of thousands of hours of recordings, and it wasn't there. We kept looking for it. When did he agree? He never did.
So why did they go after him? What's your take on that?
My take is they needed somebody to accompany Fox because Fox is a joke by himself. So they needed the Wolverine Watchman to give it credibility. That's why they were pulling them together. So yeah.
So
Like,
does this show?
Did he say something? Did he have an instant reaction with you? What did he say?
Oh, we just, we kind of skirted you guys and went down the street.
So Brandon's
just
gone now? He's gone?
Oh yeah.
What's he gonna do? He's already out.
He's out.
He's
He's
gonna
gone.
talk to us.
Yeah. Not right now. He's just enjoying a walk down a sidewalk right now. I mean, that's a big deal when you've got.
I heard them say happy birthday.
It is his birthday. Best birthday present, imaginable. So I'm very happy for Brandon. I don't know what the government's going to do with Fox and Croft, but to me, this was a signal. Rogue FBI agent, trying to line his own pockets with his own cybersecurity company, and then pushing the conspiracy that just never was going to be. Our governor was never in any danger, and I think the jury, even though they didn't get all of it, they smelled enough of it. So
Were you at any point shocked by what you heard them in that courtroom? You heard
Well,
it before. But were you
well, about
shocked
what?
when you prior recordings talk?
I'm sorry, about what?
Were you shocked when you initially heard some of these recordings?
No. I mean, they do it all the time. There are lots of recordings. They wire themselves up and going. So no, I wasn't shocked.
Do you know if they were hung on whether Fox and Croft were not guilty? I mean, were they leaning toward not guilty to them? You heard anything about that from the jury?
No. Sometimes you can talk to the jury afterwards. The judge gives them that option. He gives them our phone numbers, and we're not really allowed to reach out to them. So I have no idea what their deliberations were.
Mike, would you ask Franks and Garvin pled guilty, and they're going away?
Yeah. Garvin, I think, pled too soon. He didn't get to see the discovery and how what a predator Dan Chappell was, and what a predator.
Okay, that's a good place to leave it. It's where the video ends. But when he's talking about this guy being a predator, what does he mean by that?
Yeah, so Dan Chappell, Big Dan, or Thor, as was his code name by the FBI, and it's very clear from the tons of evidence that came out even before the trial, and a lot of this stuff the jury wasn't able to see. But this was a guy who was really instigating the entire thing. I mean, he was sort of the one leading the plot, the FBI informant Dan, and I think that, you know, his behavior was sort of predatory, and honestly, I'm not sure how much of it was his, but more at the instigation of his FBI handler, who really was pressing him to get these guys to focus, you know, to talk about a plot, right? To start putting plans in motion. And so I'm not sure how much of the details of that I want to get into now here, but I can go into quite a lot of detail on that, just how much the FBI was behind everything that happened, bringing everybody together. These guys never would have met each other if it wasn't for the FBI and the role of Dan Chappell. So, yeah.
So, okay, as you're looking at this material at the very beginning, because the coverage of it in mainstream news, you're an independent journalist, but the coverage of it in mainstream news was very much like this was just about to happen. This governor was about to be kidnapped. These guys are militia. And I want to ask you about that too. Like, what does that mean? You know, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if farming now is militia. I just don't know what that means.
That's a good point.
Well, yeah, I mean, like if you have some firearms and you live out in the middle of nowhere and you get together for beers with your friends anymore, does that mean you're militia?
That's literally what the Wolverine Watchmen were before the FBI got involved with them. They were like a small group. They started out as like a Facebook group. They mostly operated online. You know, and it wasn't that these were guys that would get together, hang out around the fire, drink beers, and like shoot their guns and stuff. I guess, you know, that's a dangerous militia now. I think that as far as the mainstream coverage goes, when the arrests were first made, the only information that you had was coming from the government, right? And their criminal complaint in their indictment of what happened. So I think initially, you know, there's very little information about just how big of a role the government played in the plot. You're only getting their narrative. It's not until a couple months go by and discovery happens that we start learning these things. So I think that their initial coverage is just sort of parroting the government narrative and how they frame things in their complaint.
One quick question that came in: what is going to happen to these agents?
Nothing. If you think something's going to happen, I've been following not just this case, but also January 6th, and I've been reporting on sort of the crazy stuff going on at the FBI. There's a lawsuit right now between a former FBI agent who was sexually harassed and another FBI agent that is just stunning when you read it. Some of the things these agents were doing, and I think it's so hard to hold them accountable. It's so hard to fire a government employee. I don't really see anything happening to them. You know, look at how they've gotten away with lying to a FISA court. You know, an inspector general report came out showing all of the times they violated the law and violated people's rights, and nothing really has happened to them. I don't really see anything, unfortunately, happening to them.
Okay, let's take a quick look at what one of the other attorneys said. And I did see somebody say that maybe the audio was a little low. Did you hear it okay last time I played the other video, Christina, or was it too low?
It was a little low.
Let's see if I can pump it up. I don't know.
I think it's just the recording is low. I mean,
maybe it is. Yeah. All right, everybody, just turn up your bass. Okay, here we go.
The presumption of innocence continues, which is a good thing. I think that the trial here has demonstrated that there's some serious shortcomings in the case. Obviously, with acquittals occurring with Mr. Caserta and Mr. Harris, says a lot about what's going on in the case and the proofs. And you know, we're ready to go. And unfortunately, I didn't show any of my papers out, so we'll be ready for another trial.
What does it say about the FBI's performance?
Adam is disappointed that he's going to be detained a bit longer, but we're waiting for a second trial, and we'll eventually get what we want to get, which is the truth and the justice. I think Adam is entitled.
What is this saying about the FBI and their use of informants and how they?
Well, the case is still continuing, really, for me, so I would really like to reserve comment. I think the outcome today demonstrates what I think about the case and where I think there's reasonable doubt, and a lot of that stemmed from our concerns regarding the behavior of the FBI.
Hey, Christina, let me stop it real fast there for a second because he doesn't want to comment. Do you have any thoughts on why he doesn't want to just give it to the FBI right now?
Yes, he can't because his client, Adam Fox, the government's going to retry him and Barry Croft. So he's technically still involved in another court case. So that's probably why he doesn't want to give comment yet, because he doesn't want it to color when they retry these guys, which I think they're going to do. They've said as much, so it wouldn't surprise me. I think that the Department of Justice is very embarrassed by what happened. You know, I've gone back and forth. Are they going to try this again? Wouldn't that just be further embarrassment for them? They haven't confirmed it. One of them said, oh, yeah, we plan to, but you not until we see it happen do we know for sure.
Another question. Would you say that there's a rogue element in these federal agencies? And I think, just to add on to that, or in your coverage and reading through these materials, both here and January 6th, and the connections there, is it coming from leadership? I always get those questions about like newsrooms, for instance. Do you just have a couple bad apples, or is it systemic, or is there messaging that comes from leadership that's like, this is how we act, the culture, like what exactly it is? Because in this particular case, it doesn't seem like management's like, oh man, they really screwed the pooch on this one. We never should have promoted those guys. They didn't do this to like a CNN to Chris Cuomo, even though they totally CNN is totally responsible, I think, for Chris Cuomo's terrible reporting. But
Yes.
I didn't see them like hang these guys out to dry or anything. It's not like they were sitting there saying, "Oh, these agents just acted against our will."
No, that's a really good point. And for example, Michael D'Antuono, who was the head of the Detroit field office that ran the Whitmer case, is once these guys were arrested back on October 7th, 2020, he was immediately promoted to head of the Washington, D.C. field office, where he is now currently overseeing the prosecution of January 6th. Defendants. So actually they get promoted. I think it is a cultural thing. I think that there's just like at large corporations, right? You have sort of a company culture that is inculcated there by the leadership. I think that's what we see at the FBI. I think a lot of these agents also kind of want to make a name for themselves, right? They want to get promoted within the organization. And this is the kind of thing that gets somebody promoted, is getting a big bust, right? That is going to make headlines, national media. So I think that there's sort of an incentive for them to kind of do these things. And as we get into the three lead agents in this case and their particular behavior throughout, I think that will become more clear. I don't want to get into that here on YouTube because some of the details of their misconduct, it's just, I don't think it's safe to talk about here.
Okay, so just another reminder to everybody who's watching on YouTube, we are going to be continuing the stream on ROKFIN in a few minutes and cutting it here on YouTube. So I'll put the link in the description and in the chat and everything. Just make sure you're ready to head over there if you want to keep listening to this. How did this even happen? Did they get off on technicalities, or did the Fed screw them for election propaganda?
That's a really good point. How did it happen? Because this actually is very common and typical. The FBI has been doing this for a very long time. You can look at COINTELPRO, right? The FBI infiltrated what they saw as dissident groups like the Black Panthers, the Weather Underground. You can look at PatCon operations. That was a subset of COINTELPRO. It was called Patriot Conspiracy, where the FBI was infiltrating what they saw as right-wing Christian groups. And this is how we got things like Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City. Then just look at what happened after 9/11 and how Muslims were targeted for extremism, and with the FBI infiltrating and kind of doing the same thing. This is not new. This is how the FBI operates. I think that it's just the scale of this one, and touching back on the prior question about the leadership of the FBI, there was one interesting tidbit that came out at trial about this, and that is that one of the lead agents in the case, Special Agent Jason Chambers, when he first opened the investigation, he opened it as a TEI case. That's Terrorism Enterprise Investigation, which is reserved for some of the biggest terror cases. You have to get approval from the leadership of the FBI. And his superior was a woman named Amanda, and he filed the paperwork to open this as a TEI. And I think there was pushback from some of the people. Some of the leadership of the FBI were like, well, why are you running this as a TEI? Like, where's the evidence to show that? And he said to her, well, I'm going to run this as a TEI, whether I get the approval for them or not. And I think that shows you sort of the intent from the very outset when they first start investigating these guys, that this agent has it in his head that this is going to be a big domestic terror case, right? This is going to be a TEI, tier 1 terror case. It's stunning. That's stunning. So yeah, there is some pushback, I guess, but somehow he got the approval anyways.
I want to keep playing the rest of this soundbite, but just a reminder also to people that if you go to Locals, there's a live chat too. If you're on Locals, you can put your questions there for Christina. And I always do questions ahead of time for people who come on for interviews. So join my editorial board over at AllisonMorrow.locals.com, and you get to give me feedback every Saturday. We're going to actually do the editorial board meeting later this afternoon because Christina was able to do this video, and that's where we just meet. I meet with viewers every Saturday to just talk about what's going on, what we have in the week ahead, what their feedback is, really like an editorial board, and we do it with the horses, so it doesn't get much better than that. Okay, Christina, let's keep watching, and everybody let me know if you can't hear it.
To retry him again, have you been told that's going to happen?
I don't know. I have not talked to the U.S. attorney, but I'm assuming that given the nature of the case, it probably goes forward.
What do you think this hinged on with this jury?
I have no idea. I don't know. So I wasn't in the privy to the jury deliberations. I only know what I know, which is my side of the case and the case that the government presented.
Is it hard for Adam to see the two others being cleared?
I don't know. It's still pretty fresh here.
Yeah.
So,
Where do you think
so we'll see how it shakes out. But we're
what
looking.
was your reaction when you heard the not guilty and then no verdict?
Oh, well,
would you call it stunning?
No, I don't know that it's stunning. I expected something to happen.
He's a lot more reserved than the other attorney. I'm guessing that's because he believes he still has a case to try.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to make a whole lot of personal comments or this is how I feel stuff, which is what reporters really want. Like, what did you feel like the moment that you heard this? So I'm guessing that's probably why. But he does seem to think though that Adam's going to get retried.
Mm-hmm. And I think that they will do that. I think that they're incredibly embarrassed. The one of the U.S. attorneys for Michigan came out and he made a statement. He said, well, I think the government proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and we're going to try this again. Of course, of course you will. You're going to try the same case with the same evidence all over again and hope for a different result, I guess. But, I think that that's why the attorney is a little bit more reserved. He knows he's going to have to do this entire thing all over again. But he did at the end say that, he was not stunned by what happened. He kind of was hopeful that the jury would kind of see through this. And that is even with how handicapped the defense was. I mean, the judge in this case had given the prosecutors many victories. There was a lot of stuff that came out in discovery that we got to see that the jury didn't get to see and wasn't allowed to know about, including the misconduct of the 3 lead FBI agents in the case. So, even still without seeing that, they still kind of saw through this, which I think is incredible.
I'm not going to play this video just because I think it's got some blood in it, and YouTube is, oh, I should say this. I've already had this video, even though we're 25 minutes in, it's demonetized. YouTube has demonetized this video. So I have requested a review, but I don't know. Like I said, even though this video on a major news outlet is monetized, I went and checked it, and it ran ads before I watched it. But that's a mainstream news outlet. They're allowed to do whatever they want. Basically, they can tell you all kinds of things, and I can't play their video without getting demonetized. So I'm not going to play it, but maybe you could tell us why this is important and what you noticed about it. And again, this is body cam video of the FBI agent.
Okay, so this is Richard J. Trask. He was one of the 3 lead agents in this case. He's actually the one that signed off on the criminal complaint. He was going to be one of the government's star witnesses, right? But what ends up happening is he gets into an altercation with his wife following a swingers party in Kalamazoo. So what has happened here and what this depicts is the body cam footage of the police who had to go take him down. And you'll hear, if you listen to this, I encourage your audience to go look this up and watch this clip. You'll hear the police saying, well, he's an FBI, the suspect is an FBI agent who has done counterintelligence. So it's dangerous for the police to go after him. He knows law enforcement tactics, right? Like they sound like they're scared of him. It's really sad. So they go to his house because his wife had called the police. She is covered in blood. You can see the blood on the sheets, the sheets of their bedding. And what had happened was they'd gone to a swingers party and she did not want to I can't use that. She did not want to participate in the swinging, we'll say, which upset Mr. Trask. He was absolutely bold-faced drunk. He might have been high as well. From his behavior in this video, he is clearly intoxicated. So when they get home, they get into this fight about what happened at the swingers party in their bedroom. He gets on top of her and he's literally strangling her. He bashes her head against a nightstand, and she is only able to get him off of her by chance, right? She hits them in the right spot, shall we say. So he gets into his car in that SUV. He flees the scene while he's drunk. He doesn't have a shirt on, and she calls the police. The police come to the home and they interview her. They speak to her outside, and then they have to go find this guy. They're calling him and they're saying, we heard about what happened. We just spoke to your wife. You need to turn yourself in, basically. So he parks at a parking lot and they come and they get him. And you can see the blood on his face. He tries to claim nothing happened. He does not spend any time in jail for what I believe was attempted murder because of his privilege as a FBI agent, right? They put him on paid leave, guys. So he didn't get charged with a DUI. He was obviously intoxicated when he fled the scene of a crime. So that's FBI privilege for you.
I think this is a good point. So morally corrupt or in charge of investigations in this country. I mean, there are morally corrupt people everywhere, in every institution, in every place of work. I think the problem that you're presenting, though, is the accountability side of things, and how it's different if somebody with very, little power is also corrupt. They usually get weeded out at some point. Or maybe, I don't know, I'm assuming like they don't have as much recourse, I guess, to say, hey, I should, come on, give me a pass. I'm just having a bad night or whatever. And the higher up they go in it, all the way up to the office of the president, the more laws that they get to break. And, I think, to me, looking at this particular case and just how things, having worked both in television news and for the government, I learned very quickly as an environmental reporter that oftentimes, like, you'd think, and I used to think this too. I do an investigation. There would be some kind of judicial action taken after my investigation, and I would think at first, oh, this is gonna make a change. And what I found was in many cases was that the more rules there were, actually the government figured out a way to turn that into something that actually benefited them and yet held accountable like just the average person. And it started to make me question my work of like exposing things that people or whatever that weren't following the rules. Cause I'm like, wait a second, what am I doing exposing these people who have no power really,
Exactly.
when these other folks are the ones that, they just like, it just gives them more impetus in some cases, I think, to make a new rule that they write or enforce for their own benefit.
Yeah, that's right. It is quite stunning how they use loopholes. I mean, when I first got into law, I had this idea that I was going to be like fighting the bad guys and justice, right, and helping the good guys. And then you get to see what the legal system really is and how it's set up, how it's designed to be a money-making thing, and just also how people who are wealthy, their ability to sort of buy their way out of things is quite stunning because they have more resources than the regular person. They can afford a team of attorneys and stuff. And just seeing too how a lot of times these judges, they're having drinks with these lawyers after, after hours, right? They're meeting at the country club. They're all hanging out and talking. The big law firms donate to the judge's reelection campaign. They're going to get favorable treatment, right? You can just you see this stuff and how it works and just how small too the legal community is, how this sort of like relationship, the chummy relationship, and just really how it's sort of like a racket. It is designed to have a ton of rules for the average person, right? There's a book called 3 Felonies a Day, right? But you just walk outside your house and you could be committing 3 felonies a day if you're, you could get put on a list, right? If you're holding a nozzle for a hose in your yard, well, that could look like a weapon. So you're now on a government watch list. It's just so, there's such a 2-tiered system. And then people at the top, people who work for the government, they get away with so much and it's so hard to hold them accountable. And then the loopholes and stuff, it's almost as if it's designed to benefit them and harm the little people, and as far as the legal system goes, there's so many ways that they hit you with fees for filing court documents, fees for this, fees for that. Even in family law, oh, you're going to get a divorce, you have children. Well, now we have to send those children to a court mandated psychologist, and we have to have a guardian ad litem, and you have to pay for all of these things. It's just, it needs to be reformed, just like the prison system as well.
I'm going to leave Christina in for this ad read because I know she needs a drink after all of this work she's been doing investigating federal law enforcement. And if just listening to all of this makes you want a glass of wine, I have the perfect solution for you at AllisonWinePromo.com. And no fees here. 50% off, actually. I mean, you have to buy the wine, but no added fees or filtration or excess dyes or chemicals. See, in fact, one of these wines uses natural fermentation, like what I'm doing with my sourdough bread starter right now in my kitchen. The other one comes from 9,000 feet almost, which is a very high altitude Malbec. And then the other one is from the oldest vineyard in Argentina, all 3 from Argentina, very unique wines. Can't get them at the grocery store, and you can support my work and, relax. And I don't know, Christina, do you have a favorite kind of wine?
I don't, actually.
Okay. Are you not a wine drinker at all?
I'm not, but that's okay.
Everybody, see, this is what real journalism is all about. You promote your sponsor and you let your guest totally say she hates your sponsor. Anyway, but if you do drink wine, you should go to AllisonWinePromo.com. Okay. So before we head over to ROKFIN, oh, I forgot to do coffee. Hello. Do you guys drink coffee? Do you drink coffee, Christina?
Yes, I am an
Okay.
addict.
Thank God. Okay. So I totally forgot to do twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, and you can get USDA certified high altitude Nicaraguan roasts. Obviously, a
Ooh.
wide variety of them. There's a cool tumbler that I use. I really like the espresso and the cigar blends are right here. They're dark roast. I'm a big dark roast drinker. But the other cool thing that they have, though I don't see it right now, is oh, here it is. If you drink tea, this Katura tea is very good. I cold brew mine for 24 hours, and you can hot brew it too, but it's the fruit that goes around the coffee bean, and you can make tea out of it. And it's really good. It's supposed to be high in antioxidants and all that good stuff, but it doesn't give you like the jitters like coffee, but it's kind of like drinking a black tea. So anyway, I really like it. Again, these are USDA certified organic. The CEO and founder of the company lives right there in Nicaragua, where they grow, harvest, and roast beans. So lots of oversight there, produces a lot of jobs. And it's just good coffee, and you can support my channel. And it's great after a night of drinking AllisonWinePromo.com. So I can't say enough about it. Okay, so Christina, what are a couple things that we want to just say before we leave YouTube that are safe enough about this particular case when it comes to its connection to January 6th? Because I think that would be a good tease for people to go over to ROKFIN, or one of the other platforms if you're watching this later and see the rest of it, because it seems like you have read enough to say that, these are not totally like mutually exclusive events.
Correct. That's right. I think that first of all, let's talk about how many militia groups are infiltrated by the FBI. Let's ask how many were created by the FBI, right? We also know from the court documents in both January 6 cases and the Michigan case, the Department of Justice has tied the cases together. They're calling what happened in Michigan the precursor to January 6. There are similar elements too, and what the discussions were, right, with 12 FBI informants. Remember, in the Michigan case, we have 6 defendants that were federally charged. 2 of them took plea deals, Ty Garbin and Caleb Frank. So we had 4 that were at trial, right? So the problem, I think, is when you have 12 informants, 2 undercover agents in a case with 6 defendants, you have more people that are working for the government than are not. So this calls into question a lot of things. And then moving into January 6th, these same militia groups, we are told, participated in the storming of the Capitol. Okay, so were there undercover FBI agents that day? Were there informants there that participated in this? If there was discussion beforehand, well, who was the FBI involved in that also? These are real questions we need to ask, because we now have the Proud Boys being charged with conspiracy. The leaders of the Proud Boys have been charged with that. And then the Oath Keepers. So were those groups infiltrated at any point? I mean, were there federal informants in these organizations? We know that the leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, was himself a longtime government informant, and so was Joseph Biggs, another leader of the Proud Boys. So what does this mean? What is the implication for January 6th? And then we see the Department of Justice saying in the Michigan case, oh, and look what just happened on January 6th. So this is a growing threat, right? That's what they're saying. And with the January 6th cases, they're saying, oh, and look, we have this growing threat of extremism, of far-right extremism. And look what happened in Michigan. That happened, and then January 6th happened. So there's an escalation. Therefore, give us more money, give us more resources. Lisa Monaco at the Department of Justice has asked for an additional $34 million to prosecute January 6 cases and to hire an additional 131 employees. So, yeah.
I was going to show you the CNN article, since you were bringing that up, about that I don't know. I'm sure some people would disagree with the term hysteria or fear mongering, but yeah, that messaging, I guess, of right wing extremism and domestic extremism being a real threat. And when I read the U.S. Attorney's Office statement, they of course said they were disappointed. And then Whitmer's chief of staff said that the governor remains focused on her work, but there must be accountability and consequences for those who commit heinous crimes. The plot to kidnap and kill a governor may seem like an anomaly, but we must be honest about what it really is, the result of violent, divisive rhetoric that is all too common across our country. There must be accountability and consequences for those who commit heinous crimes. Without accountability, extremists will be emboldened. So it's just like saturated with that messaging. And the thing that I think is really interesting about it is that they say it is a result of violent, divisive rhetoric. So it's like blaming this on speech, which, I feel like we just keep coming back to over and over again. We got to weed this out. We got to weed out violent, divisive rhetoric. We have to keep an eye, because see, this is what happens when you let people talk. You get people plotting things. And so I'm just curious what you think about that, because it does really seem like they go from, well, first off, they're not ceding any ground at all on this one. They're like, no, this still definitely happened. They were going to kidnap her and harm her. And the reason is because they were talking divisively,
right,
and all this divisive rhetoric. And, and that obviously gives impetus for and pressure on companies, even if you were to say give the big platforms, tech platforms, which, heads up to everybody again, if you're just joining us, this video is demonetized. And I should say to people, if you're not seeing my videos in your feed, that I'm getting this a lot. Somebody was writing, Allison is still surfing the knife's edge with integrity. YouTube is still smacking her down for it. Sad. And, it's true. There's something going on with my channel. A lot of people are saying they're not getting it. My views are way, way down. So I would really appreciate it if you just checked in, just what do they call those? A welfare check. Do a welfare check on my channel every once in a while, but please also be somewhere else, because if you're just on YouTube, you're not going to get notifications when I get suspended and all that other stuff. But if you want to watch on YouTube, you're still there. You're going to have to just go to my channel, because it's just, it just is. And I do think it's part of what I just said, this, whether it's in this case, they're talking about violent action coming from divisive rhetoric, or, I have doctors on that talk about COVID that pushes back on the narrative, but it's all about just the idea that if you talk about things the wrong way, very, very bad things will happen. And so we really have to babysit people's speech. And this is just another example of that. And it's just soaking in their statement.
Yeah, it's really disturbing, because if you studied sort of the East Germany, right, with the Stasi, you can see where this goes, right? It was the same thing, where do we really want to get to a point where we have husbands informing on their wives and children informing on their parents? It is really sad, but this was sort of the reasoning for why they needed to do that, right? You weren't allowed to criticize the party. Well, this is what they're doing. They're laying the groundwork for something like that. And we've heard them talk about a domestic war on terror, which should terrify everybody. Because what does that even mean? What it characterizes divisive rhetoric? Is that you just criticizing the government? Are you in their misconduct or things that they do that's wrong? You're not allowed to point that out anymore, I guess, or that's divisive and then that's dangerous. What does it really mean? And when you think about it, who is the most divisive in their speech and rhetoric? Isn't it the mainstream media, who have the biggest platform and are able to influence millions of people, right?
Or the Biden administration over the last year or so with COVID, and, blaming all the deaths on anti-vaxxers, or, turning people against their neighbors based on their medical decision-making.
Yes.
The people with the most power are, of course, the most divisive, not just because they use the same kind of rhetoric in many cases, but because they have the biggest platforms, and yet they never hold themselves to the same standards.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting too, the way that these guys, how they first kind of came on the radar of the government. Barry Croft, he came on their radar because he criticized the FBI in 2017 on his Facebook page. They say he had made anti-government, anti-law enforcement statements. And another one, came to their attention in 2019 for sort of the same thing, just saying things that on the internet that they didn't like. And so they asked at trial, well, what about the First Amendment? And it's like, oh yeah, well, you have a right to say that, but if you're going to make these statements, you're going to come on our radar, right? And the FBI tried to make a distinction between talk and actions, but when you look at the Whitmer case, it was literally all talk. I mean, for people who aren't aware of like LARPing, live action role playing, that is a lot of like what this talk was. And when we get into some of the particulars of it, it was just so outrageous, like that there's no way there was ever any plot, because the things they were talking about, it wasn't even possible for it to happen, like physically, not physically possible. It's just nonsensical. So now if it's a bunch of guys get together around the fire, they drink beer and they shoot the shit, that's now dangerous, and it's a plot and a conspiracy. If you and I say, oh, I'm concerned about the government overreach, did we just enter into a conspiracy against the government? Like, what does it really mean? These are questions everybody should be asking. It's scary.
Totally. I really do ask. This is not even on my radar a couple years ago, but I heard a podcaster say recently, he's a farmer and he has quite a following, and he was talking about how the sort of back to landers, that's what he calls the movement, people like us who want to have a family homestead, are going to be the next domestic extremists, because we're like the crazy people who aren't participating in the system. We're figuring out how to grow our own food. Like, what are they doing? What are they doing with those chickens? Or, come and get you, like, oh, they're paying cash, they're not using the credit system, or just whatever else. Like, I do think about now with what I cover, how intensely observant I need to be with all kinds of things like taxes, and just because I feel like they could use anything to come after you and just get, well, we'll get you on this or we'll get you on that. Cause you just see this stuff all the time. And, you were just on with one of the January 6th, well, he's got a bunch of defendants as his clients, but one of the attorneys, and we were talking about this, and he just said flat out, like, no, you're on a list. Like, we've done discovery for the cases for January 6th, and you would be blown away by the kind of information that the government has on people, just from like what they've been able to get from the, investigating their clients' cases in the whole January 6th thing, which I think probably this is a good place to just cut it on YouTube. And then we'll talk in detail about January 6th, about the connection with the Michigan kidnap plot and COVID too, because there is, in the election, the two topics you just, for whatever reason, like, you really can't go into on YouTube is, and you can't even quote other people. It's not, the Hill was just suspended. A huge outlet was just suspended for playing a Trump soundbite and even criticizing Trump, but it didn't matter. They still got suspended because they played a soundbite. So these are just two topics we can't talk about. I really appreciate everybody who's been watching on YouTube. We're going to continue live on ROKFIN, but the video will be up later on my other platforms. Go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com. If you get a chance, join my editorial board. I will be live later today talking about this stream and what's coming up for next week. We've got some cool interviews. You can pose questions ahead of time. Christina, any final thoughts before we go?
I just want to say that for people who are still kind of believing that there are good guys in the FBI and in the government, this should really make you question that. And, same with the Department of Justice. And it's very important that you're paying attention to these cases because they matter. They're setting a precedent. And if these people aren't held accountable, where does it stop, right? It just they continue to escalate in their behavior. And I think that I would say, I hope everybody comes and listens to the rest, because really the devil is in the details. And that is where you're going to hear some of the more disturbing aspects of this. But I do want to say at the same time, the fact that we've gotten a victory in this, right? That two guys have gotten off, that's also good news, right? I feel like I'm always covering this stuff and feeling so like demoralized or depressed or something, like, oh, things are so bad. Maybe they're not, though. Maybe they aren't that bad. You know, I was sort of expecting the worst. I thought, oh, they're going to probably give him some of the lower charges, but maybe get him off on the WMD charges or something. And that didn't happen. So, you know, that's a good thing.
I do wonder if kind of the tide's turning on just people being skeptical of just the powers that be, generally speaking. And I'm not sure what has accelerated that, you know, the last few years with the pandemic or election stuff or what, you know, the big tech platforms getting more aggressive with their censoring. But it does seem like it, you know, well, you know, I guess politically speaking, you probably make some stereotypes about how things have switched. But I think generally speaking now, I have people who follow my work on, you know, both the left and the right, who I think maybe, you know, just, I don't know, 8-10 years ago would not have agreed on that kind of skepticism, you know, and it would be like back to blue, no matter who or whatever else. And I think now you're starting to see more alignment among the people, sort of just like the average working class person about who's really got our backs and who runs the system. And are we purposely being divided by messaging that's coming from elsewhere? So we fight with each other in order to keep our attention away from where we really should put it, where we really need to put the pressure. So thank you for everybody watching on YouTube. And